Hello there, welcome to My Finance Teacher. I got a couple of comments sounding somewhat concerned about uranium price, so let's have a look at it. Perhaps it's one of those signals that we are pretty close to that uranium cycle low. Talking about those cycles, historically, uranium cycles lasted for an average of 160 days, but of course the actual range of each of those cycles ranges. Going back to, say, the middle of 2019, the range is anywhere from as short as only 3 months, lasting for 91 days. That's according to the signals that we are looking for. That's crossing the 50-day moving average for 5 days or more, RSI changing by over 20 points, slicing through the level of 50, and poking relatively wide Bollinger Bands. So based on these criteria, cycles have lasted anywhere from 91 days to as long as 249 days. That's the one at the end of 2023, early 2024. So zooming in a little, with the current cycle bringing us 175 days into the most recent low, there is a pretty good chance that it is our final cycle low, and we're going to see uranium push higher into a new cycle over the next couple of months. But of course, let me emphasize that nobody does know the future. When anyone asks me for very useful materials on market cycles, I often like to recommend the book by Howard Marks. One passage comes to mind at the moment as it relates to nobody actually knowing the future. Howard Marks suggests that markets swing similar to, say, a pendulum swinging between euphoria and depression, swinging between celebrating positive developments and obsessing over the negative ones. So hence swinging between overpriced and underpriced valuations. While an experienced investor can generally figure out whether the pendulum is leaning towards the depressed or towards the euphoric side of the market, the difficulty, it's basically extremely hard to know where exactly is the location of the pendulum, hence when exactly is it going to turn around and start moving in the opposite direction. Applying that to this ongoing cycle in uranium, we clearly are leaning towards the depressed side. But are we going to turn around anytime soon? Have we seen the cycle low just a few days ago? That still remains to be seen. It's also possible that the cycle just continues far into beyond, say, 200 days, as we've seen a cycle lasting for as long as 249 days. Generally though, as time moves on, as the cycle becomes older and older, the likelihood just improves that we are eventually going to see a rally into a new cycle. RSI is also showing some sort of a positive divergence that often, but again not always, precedes a rally into a new cycle. These all are positive signs. Talking about RSI and the technicals, at the left side of this positive divergence on RSI, we've seen RSI quite far into oversold area, dropping all the way down to the level of 12. So at least at the moment, temporarily, there is quite a bit of depression in uranium, while the longer term fundamentals still look very, very promising. By the way, for more details on those longer term fundamentals, make sure to join us at myfinanceteacher.org, because we do regularly publish the best uranium report you can find on the internet. All of the details of this uranium report, as well as nickel report, and the details on the most interesting category here, juniors in precious metals, such as Goliath Resources, for example, which has more than tripled in the last month or so. All of that and much more for only just about $13. That's just basically sharing a couple of beers with me as a token of appreciation. Coming back to the uranium price and the technicals, I mentioned the RSI dropping all the way down to 12 at the very end of last year. Another interesting technical moment here is that over the last several weeks, price dropped all the way down to this previous mid-2022 high. I think it's quite likely that this mid-2022 peak is going to provide some support. So yes, I am still convinced we are pretty close to a cycle low. Perhaps we've seen it a week ago, perhaps it's still going to be formed over the next couple of weeks. At the moment though, yes, uranium is still weak, producers are weak, this is URA in front of you. The URA cycle is somewhat extended, a bit of a push higher in January. Yes, looking at our signals, we have seen a bit of a poke above the Bollinger Bands, although the Bollinger Bands weren't extremely wide. We have seen RSI strengthen quite a lot, but the price hasn't really stayed for 5 days above the 50-day moving average. And with this double bottom in August-September last year, you might also measure a new cycle from this second touch below $23 on URA, in which case the ongoing cycle is now 172 days. If you measure anywhere from somewhere the middle of that double bottom, we are already in a quite an extended cycle of around 187 days. Again, historically, going back to the pandemic lows, the URA cycles lasted for 160 days on average, again with the longest cycle being 225 days. And well, is there a chance that we have actually seen a true cycle low at the end of December with a bit of a short cycle lasting for somewhere around 130, 140 days, depending on where you measure from in relation to this double bottom? And are we since then in a new cycle that has already peaked really quickly and is going to continue down for quite a while we reach an average duration of this cycle at least beyond 120 days? Again, it is a possibility, nobody does know the future. It would entail the pendulum going very far extreme towards the depression side though. So the likelihood of this is perhaps less than 10%. We could observe something like this happening, the uranium prices dropping down all the way below the level of 30 perhaps, if, God forbid, some sort of a nuclear disaster takes place. If not, we are probably observing the cycle low taking place sometime soon. And yes, it is somewhat scary at the moment. URA is dropping quite a lot, but at least part of this decline perhaps might be attributed to a lot of jitterness on the general stock market. This is S&P 500, dropped quite a lot over the last several days. As I mentioned in the video from yesterday, I think we're simply forming a daily cycle low on the general stock market. Once that cycle low is formed, as I mentioned, in the next couple of weeks, a pressure might actually be released from a range of other markets as well. Cryptocurrencies, for example, Bitcoin has dropped a lot over the last couple of days too. And lastly, talking about the market sentiment, remember this chart, we've looked at it already a couple of years ago. That's the ratio of producers to commodities. That's one way of looking at market sentiment. Whenever it reaches 0.4, that's when the URA is oversold. Somewhere around 0.7, that's when it's overbought. This is a historical chart. And let's have a look at what's going on right now. This is a monthly chart. So what we see is that over the last several months, over the last year or so, since the beginning of 2024, URA versus the commodities has gradually been climbing out of a relatively deep oversold area. Looking at how it happened the previous time, again, this climb is gradual while the market isn't certain. After all, this is where the sentiment is close to a depression, and the less experienced traders don't want to touch uranium producers with a 10-foot pole. Once that depression is cleared though, the previous rally into 2021 was explosive. Of course, it was also helped by a lot of liquidity provided as a result of that pandemic low. And yeah, liquidity is tight at the moment, but we still have time. We have observed this gradual climb out of a deeply oversold area. And if liquidity improves, say perhaps with general stock market dropping down into the intermediate cycle low sometime into sell in May and go away, then perhaps that will lead to a very quick revaluation in the producers as opposed to the commodity itself. So that would be my longer term view for uranium equities, as well as a short term and medium term outlook for commodity itself. That's all from me. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Give this video a like and have a terrific Tuesday. Bye bye.